Okay, we're still solving quadratic equations, and 9-6 teaches you how to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. And this happens to be one of the favorites for most students, is the quadratic formula, because you can use the quadratic formula for every single quadratic equation. It's not always the best, but it works for every one of them. Okay, so first let's talk about the quadratic formula. You know a quadratic equation has an a, a b, and a c in it, and the a is with the x squared term, the b is the coefficient of the x term, and the c is the constant. And it points out that a cannot equal 0, which means it has to have an x squared term. And then the formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so then they show you an example. Here's your quadratic equation. They're telling you that a is 2 because the x squared coefficient is 2, b is 3, and c is negative 5. So you're going to take everywhere you see a b here, you're going to put in a 3. And everywhere you see an a here, you're going to put in a 2. And everywhere you see a c, you're going to put in a negative 5. And so they've put it in the formula. Now that's not the end of it. You do have to work it out and figure out what the answer is going to be. But that's how you plug it in. So now we're going to do one on our own using the quadratic formula. So first we have to figure out what a, b, and c are. So a is the number in front of the x squared term, which is 1. B, it's not in standard form. Let's make it be in standard form. So this needs to move over here. We get x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. Okay, now we got a is 1, b is negative 2, and c is negative 8. So if we plug it into the quadratic formula, first let's write it. So we get x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So everywhere I see a b, I'm going to put negative 2. Everywhere I see an a, I'm going to put 1. And everywhere I see a c, I'm going to put negative 8. So it's going to be negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 8 all over 2 times 1. And if you bring that up, we're going to have positive 2 plus or minus positive 4 minus 4 times negative 8 all over 2. So now I'm just simplifying using the order of operations. That's going to be 2 plus or minus. That's 4 plus 32 because that's negative 4 times negative 8, so it's going to be positive 32 over 2. So that's going to be 2 plus or minus the square root of 36 over 2. The plus or minus means you're going to add and you're going to subtract. So that's going to be 2, and the square root of 36, of course, is 6. So it's going to be 2 plus 6 over 2, and it's going to be 2 minus 6 over 2. Which means my two answers are going to be 8 over 2, which is 4, and negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. Okay, got it number 1. I'm going to start you off, and then I want you to simplify it on your own. Your A, of course, is 1, B is negative 4, and C is negative 21, because to put it in standard form, you have to subtract the 21. Okay, so I want you to plug this into the quadratic formula for yourself, and then pause the video and I'll show you the answers you should have gotten when you simplified. Okay, so you should have gotten x equals negative 3 and 7. Don't forget that you have to show all of your work to receive credit for it. If not, you'll be doing it for no reason because you won't get any credit. Okay, so the next example is a real-world example of how you find approximate solutions of problems. a lot of times when you're dealing with quadratics, the real world applications for them are if you are throwing something. Because if you think about throwing something, it does have a parabola shape. All right, so it's asking about when the ball is going to land. And that when the ball lands, the height's going to be 0, so y is going to be 0. So what we're trying to do is solve the quadratic equation, 0.04x squared plus 0.84x plus 2. So you can plug that into the quadratic formula. This is A, this is B, and this is C. So it's going to be negative B, so negative 0.84, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 0.84 squared, minus 4 times a, which is negative 0.04, times c, which is 2, all over 2 times negative 0.04. So you always do parentheses first, and in that also means underneath the radical. So we're going to simplify what's underneath the radical. And that's going to end up being 1.0256. So it's going to be negative 0.84 plus or minus the square root of 1.0256. All over 2 times negative 0.4 is negative 0.08. Okay, now you are going to take your calculator to do negative 0.84 plus the square root of this divided by this. And then you're going to take your calculator and do negative 0.84 minus the square root of this divided by this. When you do that, you should get, if you add them, you should get about negative 2.16. And if you subtract them, you should get about 23.16. Okay, now we're going to talk about which method is best for solving our quadratics. I'm going to show you some different examples and explain to you why the method is the best. If you'll look at example A here, there is no x term at all. And by x term, I mean this term right here where it's just the x. So when that's the case, the best method of solving is going to be by taking square roots. And the reason why is because there is no x term. Alright, if you'll look at B, it is, now you kind of have to be able to look at something and tell if you can factor it. And for a quadratic trinomial like this, you want to be able to multiply and get 30 and subtract and get 1. Well, you can do negative 6 and 5. So this one's easily factorable, so the best way to do this one is by factoring. And the reason why is because it's easily factorable. Okay, C, for that one, because the leading coefficient is a 6, for that one I would use the quadratic formula. Because it's not easily factorable or not factorable at all. You can put not factorable. I'm pretty sure you can't factor that one. Alright, for D, if you tried to factor this, what multiplies to give you 3? There's only 2 numbers. It's 1 and 3. Are they ever going to add to give you 5 or subtract to give you 5? No, they're not. So because of that, this one's going to be the quadratic formula. Again, and the same reason is because it's not factorable. You could also complete the square for this one if you wanted to, and that's where you move that over, you half that and then square it. But if you can't easily half 5, so it's probably better for you if you just did the quadratic formula. And then for the last one, you don't want to have to try to factor this, so again you're going to say quadratic formula. And that's why it's the easiest, is because it works every single time, so it's easier than trying to figure out which way's the best way to do it. Alright, got it. Number 3, I want you to use the information I have up here to tell me which one is the best method for factoring. I'm going to tell you, not for factoring, but for solving the quadratic. Your answers are either going to be factoring, quadratic formula, or completing the square. Or by taking square roots. 4 different options you can choose. Okay? I'm not going to tell you the right answers because there's no work to show. Alright, now last thing I want to talk about is the discriminant of a quadratic. The discriminant of a quadratic was going to tell you how many solutions there are. So if you want to write this down, you can pause the video, but I'm going to go through it really quickly. The discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula that's underneath the radical. If the discriminant is positive, there are 2 solutions. If the discriminant is 0, there is 1 solution. And if the discriminant is negative, there are no solutions. And the reason being is because if it's the square root of a positive number, then when you do the quadratic formula, you'll have the plus the positive and the minus the positive. If it's the square root of 0, if the discriminant is the square root of 0, then it's going to be the discriminant is 0, then in the quadratic formula you're going to get the square root of 0. Well, there's only one square root of 0, so that's why there's only one solution. And then if it's the discriminant's negative, that means the number under the radical sign would be negative, and there is no way to take the square root, a real square root of a negative number, so that's why there would be no real solutions. Also, if you wanted to talk about the graphs, a positive discriminant shows that the graph crosses the x-axis twice, so there are 2 real roots. 0 discriminant means that the parabola rests on the x-axis, so the vertex actually is sitting on the x-axis. And no real solutions means it doesn't touch the x-axis at all. Alright, so if I wanted to find the discriminant of this formula for example 4, first I have to put it in standard form, so that's going to be 2x squared minus 3x plus 5 equals 0, because you've got to move that over here. That means A is 2, B is negative 3, and C is 5. Well, the discriminant of a quadratic is the portion of the quadratic formula that's underneath the square root symbol. So that's going to be b squared minus 4ac, which means it's going to be negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times 5, which is 9 minus 8 times 5 is 40, which is negative 31. Because the discriminant is a negative number, that means there are no real solutions. No real solutions. And I'll explain in class what's the difference between a real solution and whatever other solution I might be talking about. Alright, so got it. Number 4. I'll go ahead and put it in standard form for you. It's going to be 6x squared minus 5x minus 7 equals 0. So A is 6, B is negative 5, and C is negative 7. Go ahead and put that in that discriminant formula like I have written up there, and then tell me how many real number solutions are in it. I'll tell you how many real number solutions in it after you pause the video, but you have to show your work. Alright, there are 2 real solutions to got it number 4. I don't want you to do B. Not by yourself. Okay, if you have any questions, you know how to contact me. Otherwise, I'll see you in class tomorrow.